Hello everybody, it's Tarun. Welcome to your 18th tutorial in the CSS for presentation course. In this tutorial, I'll start with absolute positioning. So let's start. Absolute positioning works a bit differently and is actually a more flexible method for accurately placing items on the page rather than relative positioning. Now that you have seen how relative positioning works, let's take the same example as shown in the last tutorial. Only this time we'll change the value of position property to absolute. Okay, so here I'll change this to absolute. Okay, so now let's save it and see what happens. Okay, you can see that it goes on the top. Okay, the space once occupied by the EM element here uh, is now closed up, as in the case for absolutely positioned elements. In its new position, the element box overlaps the surrounding content. In the end, absolutely positioned elements have no influence whatsoever on the surrounding elements. The most significant difference here, however, is the location of the positioned element. This time the offset value position EM element 30 pixel down and 60 pixel to the right of the top left corner of the browser window. But wait, before you start thinking that absolutely positioned elements are always placed relative to the browser window, I am afraid that there is more to it than that. What actually happens in absolute positioning is that the element is positioned relative to its nearest containing block. It just so happens that the nearest containing block in this example is the root or you can say HTML element, also known as the initial containing block. So the offset value position the EM element relative to the whole document. Okay, getting a handle on the containing block concept is the first step to tackling absolute positioning. So we'll see now containing blocks. The CSS 2.1 recommendation states the position and size of an element's box or boxes are sometimes calculated relative to a certain rectangle called the containing block of the element. It is critical to have an awareness of the containing block of the element you want to position. We sometimes refer to this as the positioning context. The recommendation lays out a number of integrate rules for determining the containing block of an element, but it basically boils down to this. First, if the positioned element is not contained within another positioned element, then it will be placed relative to the initial containing block, okay, which is the HTML block. HTML element. Second, but if the element has an ancestor, that is, it is contained within an element, that it has position set to relative, absolute or fixed, the element will be positioned relative to the edges of that element instead. So in the example as you are seeing right now, is the example of the first case. The paragraph element that contains the absolutely positioned EM element is not positioned itself, and there are no other positioned elements higher in the hierarchy. Therefore, the EM element is positioned relative to the initial containing block, which is equivalent to the browser window area. Now, let's deliberately turn the paragraph element into a containing block and see what happens. All we have to do is apply the position property to it. We don't have to actually move. The most common way to make an element into a containing block is to set the position to relative, but don't move it with offset values. Okay, so we'll keep the style rule for the EM element the same, but we'll add a position property to the paragraph element, thus making it containing block for the positioned EM element. So I'll just make that. Okay, here you can see I have added style for paragraph. Okay, so now let's see what happens in the browser. Okay, you can see here that the EM element is now positioned 30 pixels down and 60. Just a second. Okay, you can see 30 pixels down and 60 pixels from the top left corner of the paragraph box, not the browser window. Notice that that it is positioned relative to the padding edge of the paragraph and not the content area edge. Okay, this is the normal behavior when the block elements are used as containing blocks. Okay, so here we can see that the I'll just show you one more example, then I'll explain what I was trying to say. So I'm going to poke around at this some more to reveal additional aspects of absolutely positioned objects. This time I've added a width and margin property to the position EM element. So now let's see what I'm talking about. Okay, so here you can see I've added width and margin property to the EM element. So now let's save it and see what happens in the browser. Okay, so here is what we can see. First, the offset value applies to the outer edges of the element box. Okay, and second, absolutely positioned elements always behave as block level elements. For example, the margins on all sides are maintained even though this is an inline element. Okay, so it is important to keep in mind that once you have positioned an element, it becomes the new containing block for all the elements it contains. Consider this. I'll just consider this the example for this. Okay, so now we'll move forward to the next topic, which is specifying the position. Now that you have a better feel for the containing block concept, let's take some time to get better acquainted with the offset property. So far we have only seen an element moved a few pixels down and to the right, but that's not all you can do, of course. Okay. The first thing here is pixel measurements. As mentioned previously, positive offset values push the position element box away from the specified edge and toward the center of the containing block. If there is no value provided for a site, it is set to auto and the browser adds enough space to make layout work. So in the following example, I've used the pixel length for all the 4 offset properties to place the position element at a particular spot in its containing element. Okay, so I'll just show you the example now. Okay, so now I have added for H1 and P. So now let's save it and see what happens in the browser. Okay, so here you can see something awkward happens. I'll just show you one figure also where you will understand what I'm trying to say. So as I showed you in the browser window, it just looked like this. Instead of division div A and div B here, I used H1 and paragraph. So this was the layout. How did we see it? Okay. Notice that by setting offsets on all 4 sides, I have indirectly set the dimensions of the position div B, okay, or the paragraph. And if I had also specified a width and other box properties for div B here in this figure, there is potential for conflicts if the total of the values for the position box and its offsets do not match the available space within the containing block. The CSS specification provides a set of rules for handling conflicts, but the upshot is that you should just be careful not to over specify box properties and offsets. In general, a width or you can say factoring in optional padding, border and margin and 1 or 2 offset properties are all that are necessary to achieve the layout you are looking for. and let the browser take care of the remaining calculations. So now we'll see about the percentage value. You can also specify positions with percentage values. So I'm just going to show you one example, okay, where I have the image is positioned halfway down the left edge of the containing block, and in the second example on the right the image element is positioned so that it always appears in the bottom right corner of the containing block. So I'll just show you the example now. Okay, here in the first part you can see what I was talking about, and in the second part also you can see what I was talking about. So although the examples here specify both a vertical and horizontal offset, it is common to provide just one offset for a position element. For example, to move it left or right into a margin using the either left or right properties. Okay, so this was all about absolute positioning. So now we'll move forward to the next and the last two topics of this unit, which is stacking order and fixed positioning. So first of all, we'll see stacking order. Okay. So before we close the topic on absolute positioning, there is one last related concept that I want to introduce. As we have seen, absolutely positioned elements overlap other elements, so it follows that multiple positioned elements that have the potential to stack up one another. By default, elements stack up in the order in which they appear in the document, but you can change the stacking property with the z-index property. So picture the z-axis as a line that runs perpendicular to the page, as though from the tip of your nose to this page and out the other side. So first of all, I'll tell you the values for z-index property. Okay, the values are number, auto, the default value is auto. It is applied to positioned elements only and it do not inherit. The values of the z-index property is a number which is positive or negative. The higher the number, the higher the element will appear in the stack. The lower numbers and negative values move the element lower in the stack. So I'll just show you one example. Okay. So let me just make up the markup for that example. So here is the markup for that example. Okay, I have added 3 paragraphs. And I'll just add the style sheet now. Okay, so let me just change the images here. I'm just going to change the images all the same. Okay, so now let's save and see what happens in the browser. So then I'll explain it. Okay, so here you can see there are the 3 paragraph elements, each containing 3 images. Okay, each, and that have been positioned in a way that they overlap on the page. By default, you can see for the paragraphs C. So I'll just change the images here so you'll get to know it better. Okay, I'll just remove this here. Okay, so now I'm going to change the images here. Okay, I have changes all the 3 images. So let's see the change. Okay, you can see the change here. The images are not resized. Okay, So I'll just resize them first of all. So here you can see all the three images here, and here you can see also that the image in the last here is the image of the tree, which is py.jpg. Then we have a.jpg. Then we have best.jpg. JPG. Okay. So as you can see in the style sheet, I have added z index 10 for A ID, then for 5 for B, then 1 for C. And as we saw in the browser that the py.jpg was on the bottom. As you can see, z index is lowest for that. And then we had a.jpg. The z index is greater than the z index for B is greater than for C. Then we had best.jpg, and you can here also see that the z index is 10, which is greater than the both. Okay, so to be honest, the z index property is not often used or required for most page layouts, but you should know it's there if you need it. And this was all in the stacking. Okay, so we'll now see the last topic in this unit, which is fixed positioning. We have covered relative and absolute positioning. So now it's time to take on the remaining method, which is the fixed positioning. For the most part, fixed positioning works just like absolute positioning. The significant difference is that offset values for fixed element are always relative to the viewport, which means that the position element stays put even when the rest of the page scrolls. So, okay, fixed elements are often used for menus that stay in the same place as the top, bottom or side of a screen, so they are always available even when the content scrolls. Please take a moment here, and if you want to see something more about this fixed positioning, then you can go ahead and search on the web. And what you need to do is that you just need to change the value of position to fixed only. So I'll just show you an example now. So here you can see that the position for EM is absolute now. Now I'm going to change it to fixed. So now let's save it and see what happens in the browser. Okay, so earlier what happened that it was here and it remained here, but now if I am scrolling, you can see that the looking gentleman EM tag remains there. So this was all about the floating and positioning from my side in this tutorial and in this unit. In the next tutorial, I'll start with the next unit, okay, which is page layout with CSS. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next tutorial.